Rolex has been unstoppable for a very long time, a brand that practically sold itself, with waiting lists that stretched 12 to 18 months and resale prices that often climbed 20 to 30% above retail. But 2025 is telling a very different story. Rolex is losing customers fast, and what's happening now would have been unthinkable just a few years ago. Across major cities around the world, Rolex boutiques are reporting steep declines in walk-in traffic, some as much as 50% down compared to 2022 figures. Models that once moved within days now linger for weeks on display. Dealers who used to flip high-demand watches for huge profits are struggling to find buyers willing to pay premium prices. Part of this shift comes from changing tastes. Younger collectors and buyers under 40 are turning toward independent micro-brands, smartwatches with tech-forward utility, and vintage pieces with real stories, not just a logo. And when a new Daytona or Submariner can cost $15,000 to $25,000 at retail, many buyers are asking a simple question: is it worth it? Even resale values are softening. Several top models that used to trade above retail are now flat or dipping below their original price. And in a market built on perceived scarcity and long-term value, that's starting to matter. This isn't just a trend, it's a rapid shift in perception, demand, and culture. Rolex's customer base is shrinking, and the reasons go much deeper than price tags. Let's break it down. The hype is over. In 2025, something surprising is happening with Rolex watches. For many years, Rolex was the brand that almost everyone wanted. People waited for years at authorized dealers to buy certain models like the Submariner or GMT Master. Many buyers believed that owning a Rolex meant status, success, and investment value. But now, that story is changing. The huge demand that made Rolex watches so difficult to get is starting to fade. More and more, the world is moving past the pandemic-era hype, and customers are reacting in new ways that tell us demand for Rolex is normalizing. At the peak of the hype, Rolex watches were almost impossible to buy. People would stand on waiting lists for months or even years for the most popular models. Gray market dealers, unofficial sellers, could charge huge prices because so many buyers were desperate. But beginning around 2022, this intense demand began to soften. Rolex itself started producing more watches, which helped reduce scarcity. Instead of fewer pieces distributed slowly, more watches were available. As supply grew, the extreme waiting times began to shrink. Reports showed that waiting lists for a Submariner, which once took many months, dropped to about 60 days by late 2024. Similarly, the wait for a GMT Master, once measured in half a year or more, fell closer to 90 days. This shift has a big effect on why Rolex no longer feels as unreachable as before. When people see that a watch is easier to buy, they stop feeling that it is an exceptional treasure. When rarity weakens, demand can weaken too. That is exactly what is happening now. Buyers are no longer lining up around the block to chase the same intense status symbol they once did. The secondary market also shows changes. For many years, some Rolex watches sold for far above their original retail prices, and that drove excitement. People saw Rolex not only as a timepiece, but also as a financial bet. Buy, wait, and sell later for a profit. But secondary prices have been falling from their highs. Some Rolex sports models that once traded well above retail are now trading at or below their original retail prices. For example, the Root Beer GMT Master 2 was once in high demand, but its resale price fell below retail value, a major change from just a few years earlier. This price normalization matters because it shows less speculative pressure. When prices rise only because investors think they can flip for easy profit, demand is not truly driven by everyday buyers who want a watch for personal use. As that speculative force weakens, overall demand changes too. Fewer people are trying to buy Rolex watches just to resell them quickly. And that means fewer customers are lining up or paying more than retail purely to get one. Another reason demand is changing is that buyers now see other watch alternatives. During the peak hype, many collectors and newcomers focused almost exclusively on Rolex because it seemed like the most reliable choice. But as Rolex's dominance softened, buyers started exploring other brands like Omega, Cartier, and independent makers. These brands have been praised for design, value, or innovation, giving buyers new reasons to look beyond Rolex even if they could still get one. Some of these competitor brands have even grown their popularity among younger buyers. This shift does not mean Rolex has lost all its power. Even through the normalization, the brand remains one of the most recognized and respected luxury watchmakers in the world. Rolex continues to lead many segments of the market, and some models still hold strong value. But the intense premium that once made certain Rolex models outstanding is not as strong as it was. Running down the memory of pandemic-era selling, when Rolex watches felt like rare treasure, helps explain why today's demand feels different. Economists and market watchers see this normalization as part of a broader change in the luxury watch industry. After a period of exceptional highs and unusual demand patterns, the market is adjusting to more stable, predictable patterns of buying and selling. Buyers are currently thinking more carefully before spending large sums. These changes mean Rolex is no longer the automatic first choice for everyone. In many ways, demand has become more balanced between personal tastes, realistic pricing, and actual availability, rather than being driven by fear of missing out. The scarcity that once drove long waiting lists and high resale prices is easing, and customers are reacting accordingly. With easier access, softer secondary prices, and shifting buyer interests, Rolex demand in 2025 is not as extreme as it was some years back. This change helps explain why the brand is now losing customers faster than before, not because Rolex no longer makes quality watches, but because less intense demand means people have more choices and are no longer rushing to buy simply out of panic or speculation. But here's where it all gets worse for the Rolex brand: the crash of resale prices. When most people think of buying a Rolex, they don't always dream of picking one up brand new, straight from an authorized dealer. A big part of Rolex's fame has come from what happens after a watch leaves the store, on the secondary market. The secondary market is where people sell watches that were already bought before. These can be pre-owned pieces, watches sold through private dealers, or timepieces resold by collectors. For years, this market drove massive excitement around Rolex, because many models sold for far more than their original prices. But in 2025, things have changed. From approximately 2020 through 2022, Rolex watches were often the hottest assets in the world of luxury watches. People bought them at dealer price and then flipped them for huge profits. A steel sports model like a Rolex Submariner or GMT Master 2 could sell for many thousands more than its original price. This made Rolex especially appealing not only to enthusiasts, but to investors and speculators who saw profit potential. That speculative layer made the brand's demand much stronger than genuine interest in wearing the watch alone. However, since 2022, the secondary market began a long correction where prices steadily fell. One of the most striking examples in 2025 is that some popular Rolex sports models are now trading at or below the original retail price on many resale platforms. In practical terms, this means buyers in mid-2025 can sometimes buy a used Rolex for what the watch originally cost new, or even less. These price moves represent changes of more than 10% decline over 2 years for key references. There are a few big reasons for this shift. First, inventory of pre-owned Rolex watches has become much larger than it was at the peak of demand. When people expected ever-rising prices, many watch owners chose to sell to flippers or dealers so they could lock in profits. Hundreds or thousands of these watches entered the market and have stayed available, meaning there is still more supply than buyers. More supply with less rush to buy equals lower prices. Second, waiting times for the most popular Rolex models have shortened compared to recent years, reducing the urgency for buyers to resort to the secondary market at high premiums. When customers know they can get a Submariner more quickly from a dealer now than they could 2 or 3 years ago, fewer feel forced to pay extra in the resale world. This shift has also contributed to a weaker price floor for used Rolex watches. Third, the global market has seen broader economic pressure. Inflation, higher interest rates, and geopolitical events have affected consumer attitudes toward big-ticket luxury purchases. Some buyers who might have once spent tens of thousands on a secondary Rolex are now more cautious, choosing to wait, save more money, or look for watches that cost less. Because demand softened, sellers who want to move inventory may lower prices, and dealers may adjust values downward. This contributes further to the weak secondary pricing environment. These declines matter because the secondary market has long been a major driver of Rolex's customer appeal. Many buyers were motivated not just by love of the watch, but by the belief that they could profit later. When the resale story was so strong, a buyer might think that a watch might pay for itself or increase in value. But if watches are now selling at or below original retail value, that investment logic begins to weaken. Customers who once viewed Rolex as a safe asset may no longer see the same potential return, reducing the number of buyers entering the market. Another part of the story is the contrast between Rolex and some of its competitors. While Rolex still performs better than many other luxury watch brands in secondary pricing, the gap is not as wide as it used to be. Other brands once considered less desirable on resale have gained respect and value retention. In some cases, those brands' secondary prices have been steadier, making them attractive alternatives. This adds pressure to Rolex's ability to attract new customers who might otherwise think Rolex is the only good choice. More subtle, but also important, are the psychological signals that weak secondary prices send. When collectors see year after year declines in pre-owned values, some begin to question whether the trend will continue. If prices have fallen 5% or more, and then another year shows similar movement, buyers can become hesitant. This hesitation affects both the second-hand market and the primary market because people delay purchases or negotiate harder for lower prices. Even though Rolex's resale value issues are real, analysts also note signs of partial stabilization, which suggests that the market may be finding a new balance after several years of correction. However, this stabilization still represents a much lower price environment than the peak years. Therefore, while the downward pressure has slowed, it remains a challenge for the brand's customer appeal. As demand declines in the secondary market, it circles back to new watch sales, contributing to the broader pattern of Rolex losing customers in 2025. Meanwhile, there's a new trend that is taking over the whole industry: the game changers. In 2025, one of the biggest forces changing the luxury watch market is younger buyers, especially Generation Z, people roughly born between 1997 and 2012. This new group of customers is not buying watches the way older generations do. Their tastes, lifestyle values, and fashion choices are reshaping what kinds of watches are popular. For Rolex, traditionally known for large steel sports models, this shift has changed how many people want to buy and wear watches, and that has real consequences for the brand's customer base. For decades, the most popular Rolex watches were sporty, robust pieces, watches that look bold, rugged, and unmistakably Rolex. These models dominated the market partly because collectors and buyers of all ages saw them as timeless classics. But Generation Z is not following the same patterns. They are increasingly interested in smaller, slimmer, and more design-led watches. These are pieces that feel more elegant, wearable with fashion outfits, and often easier to pair with both formal and casual style. According to a major market report, the share of dress watch purchases among Gen Z buyers has grown by 44% from 2018 to 2025. In contrast, other age groups have seen dress watch purchases rise by only about 29% in the same time. Today, about 12% of all watches bought by Gen Z are dress watches, a higher share than any other age group. These shoppers are pushing the market towards slimmer, design-focused watches instead of chunky steel sports models. One clear example of this trend is the popularity of Cartier, a brand known more for elegant and classic design than for heavy sports watches. Among Gen Z buyers, Cartier's share of total purchases on the secondary watch market has risen fourfold over the last 7 years, moving from about 1.7% to 6.8%. This sharp rise shows that younger buyers are not just slowly exploring new brands. They are actively choosing entirely different styles of watches that fit their tastes better. Cartier's watches, like the Tank and Santos Dumont, are usually smaller, sleeker, and have a different kind of visual appeal compared with most sports Rolex watches. Younger buyers see these watches as fashion statements and expressions of personal style, not just functional tools. In some cases, younger buyers treat watches more like jewelry or accessories, something you stack with bracelets or coordinate with outfits, rather than just something you wear to tell time. This shift in preferences matters deeply for Rolex because the brand's most iconic models have traditionally been large steel sports watches. Those semi-tool watches were once the flagship of the brand and drew many buyers into Rolex ownership, but Gen Z's rising interest in dressier, slimmer timepieces means that the category where Rolex once led without competition is no longer as dominant. As more new, style-oriented buyers enter the market with different tastes, Rolex faces stronger competition from brands that excel in those categories. Younger buyers also tend to think differently about how they shop and what they value. Many Gen Z shoppers are digital natives who research products online, compare designs, and look for watches that match both fashion trends and personal identity. They often value authenticity, unique appearance, and brand story more than heritage alone. That is why watches that feel artistic or fashion-forward can attract attention more quickly than traditional tool watches. Another factor is that Gen Z is comfortable with the pre-owned watch market. Unlike older buyers who value brand-new pieces, many younger buyers prefer to explore second-hand listings, where they can get better value or find rare, style-unique pieces. According to reports on younger buyer behavior, as much as 80% of Gen Z watch purchases happen on the pre-owned market. These buyers value having many choices and good pricing, which makes them less likely to follow the old pattern of eager waiting lists for new Rolex models. Gen Z's approach has changed how the luxury watch market functions overall. The market is now more diversified. Some buyers still love big old classic watches, but others want watches that fit their growing interest in fashion, design, and lifestyle expression. For Rolex, this means that demand is not as automatic as it used to be. Younger buyers are not always convinced that the classic steel sports look fits their personal identity or current fashion trends. When buyers have a wide variety of attractive options outside of Rolex, this naturally reduces Rolex's share of new customers. Another important aspect of these changing preferences is that Gen Z buyers are more price-conscious and value-driven. Many young buyers do not yet have the long savings history or large disposable income that older collectors might have. This means they look for watches that feel like good value for money, fit multiple outfits and occasions, and align with their personal style narratives. Elegant, versatile dress watches often fulfill these needs more easily than specialized sports models. Even within the Rolex stable, younger buyers gravitate toward watches that feel stylish and wearable, like the Datejust. And these preferences of younger buyers are reshaping the luxury watch landscape. Rolex's historical dominance is being challenged by changing tastes and broader consumer choices. This generational shift is a major reason why Rolex is facing pressure in winning new customers in 2025, as younger buyers explore alternatives and redefine what luxury watches mean to them. But do you know the most interesting part? Rolex isn't even helping matter. Rolex's access problem? In 2025, one of the hidden reasons Rolex is losing customers is how it sells, distributes, and services watches. Rolex is not just making less watches or facing weak demand. The brand is actively changing how customers buy and maintain their timepieces. These changes may seem technical, but they have big effects on real people who want to buy or service a Rolex. Instead of simply selling watches through many local retailers, Rolex is now tightening control over its distribution network, adjusting service procedures, and reshaping the customer experience. For decades, Rolex built much of its reputation on a strong global network of authorized dealers, ADS. These are independent jewelry and watch stores that carry Rolex watches, take orders, offer advice, and help customers find the right model. Many of these store owners developed strong relationships with their local communities. But in recent years, Rolex started reducing the number of authorized dealers. Experts estimate that the number of Rolex sales points has fallen by about 20% over the past few years. In 2025, the global network stood at roughly 1,250 selling points. Some predictions even suggest this could shrink further to 800 or fewer in the long term. This reduction isn't random. Rolex is purposely eliminating stores that are underperforming or less aligned with its vision. In some cases, this means that local jewelry shops that relied heavily on Rolex sales are losing that business entirely. For those shops, the loss of a Rolex account can be devastating because Rolex models often make up a large share of their revenue. This kind of change can reduce the number of places where customers can physically see and try on Rolex watches, a key part of the purchase experience for many buyers. Rolex is also working to increase its own control over retail and distribution. In 2023, the company acquired Bucherer, a major multi-brand retailer with over 100 locations. Rolex now controls many of those stores and can manage how Rolex watches are displayed and sold in them. This gives Rolex more influence over pricing, inventory, and customer experience. But it also means Rolex is less dependent on smaller independent dealers that once connected deeply with local communities and collectors. The strategy behind this centralization is clear. Rolex wants tighter control over its brand image, pricing, and distribution. By prioritizing stores it controls directly or through key partners, the company can decide which watches go where, especially the most popular models. However, there is a downside. Fewer independent dealers can mean fewer local touchpoints for customers, especially in smaller cities or regions where mono-brand boutiques are not opening. This gap in access can make the brand feel less significant to buyers outside major luxury hubs. A major part of this shift also shows up in after-sales service, the repairs and maintenance that Rolex owners need over time. In 2025, Rolex announced the closure of its service center in Guangzhou, China, which had been operating for about 20 years. Now customers who need repairs in Guangzhou must send their watches through authorized retailers, and Rolex will forward these watches to service facilities in larger cities like Beijing or Shanghai. In addition, Rolex is removing the reception desk at its Beijing service center, making the initial customer-facing experience less direct and less personal. These changes reflect a broader rebalance of control. Rolex is consolidating service functions into fewer centers, and this may increase consistency and quality at each location. But it also means less local presence for customers, especially in major markets like China. For many buyers and owners, the convenience of having a nearby service center is not small. It is a big part of owning a luxury watch. When that service becomes less accessible or more complicated, the experience can feel frustrating rather than premium. Some watch market analysts believe Rolex is trying to replicate what other luxury brands have done. Create flagship stores where buying, servicing, and certified pre-owned sales all happen together. This one-stop approach can improve brand control and customer trust, especially for complex service work that requires high expertise. But there is a trade-off. Independent service centers that once offered quick turnaround times or community trust may disappear, leaving customers with fewer options and longer waits. Another consequence of Rolex's distribution changes affects authorized dealers themselves. Industry commentary suggests that many small and mid-sized jewelry retailers are losing their Rolex accounts. Some dealers must invest heavily to maintain Rolex licenses, upgrading their store layout, training staff, and meeting strict brand standards. If they cannot make those investments, Rolex often reallocates its inventory to larger, more upscale boutiques or company-controlled stores. This further reduces the number of places willing or able to stock sought-after Rolex models. For customers, especially new buyers, these distribution shifts can be discouraging. Visit a local retailer, and you might find that Rolex watches are not available, difficult to inspect, or only shown on appointment. That makes the purchase feel more like a transaction than a personal experience. Watches are emotional purchases for many people. The bond between a customer and a trusted salesperson often builds loyalty over time. When that local connection weakens, so does the emotional pull toward the brand. Changes in distribution and service mean Rolex is focusing more on brand control and margin optimization than on ease of access or local relationships. While the strategy can help Rolex manage scarcity and maintain pricing strength, it also creates the sense of distance between the brand and its customers. People who once cherished walk-in experiences or quick services now face longer waits or fewer options. Over time, that can unintentionally drive customers away and give competitors an opening to build deeper customer relationships. Unfortunately, there's still one factor that has been a problem for Rolex: how price hikes backfire. In 2025, one major reason Rolex is losing customers is how the brand raised prices at the same time the market was changing. Many watch buyers today are more cautious. They look at cost, value, and whether a watch is worth the amount of money asked. Rolex has a powerful reputation, but when buyers feel prices are too high, their resistance grows. This resistance affects new customers, repeat customers, and even collectors who used to see Rolex as a stable buy. Throughout 2025, Rolex continued its long-running trend of raising retail prices on its watches. Some models saw increases of up to around 8%, especially watches made of precious metals like gold. Even steel models, which are among the most popular among collectors, saw small price increases. These increases did not happen in a vacuum. The luxury watch industry has been dealing with rising costs of materials, such as gold and precious metals, which rose sharply in the prior year. Rolex has passed much of that cost on to buyers by increasing retail pricing. For many buyers, especially those who are not wealthy collectors, rising prices spark hesitation. These customers begin to question whether Rolex offers value for money. They may pause, delay purchases, or look to competing brands that feel more reasonably priced. This resistance is strongest among buyers who do not see immunity to price hikes. Many consumers around the world, not just first-time buyers, report that rising luxury prices make them more cautious about big purchases. Another important factor in buyer resistance is the contrast between retail prices and resale values. Rolex pre-owned watch prices have been falling. Some data shows average pre-owned Rolex values fell several percent year over year. This creates a strange situation. On one side, Rolex increases its new watch prices. On the other side, second-hand values decline. That gap makes buyers rethink the financial logic of buying new. If a new Rolex costs much more than before and then you cannot sell it for a good price later, many potential customers question whether it is worth the investment. Many buyers now see a steep difference between what Rolex charges and what the market is willing to pay. When retail prices go up while resale values decline, the perception of value goes down. Retail pricing becomes a bigger barrier, especially for buyers who enter the market hoping for both a luxury product and a good long-term value. This effect pushes more buyers toward pre-owned Rolex watches, because second-hand prices can feel like a better deal. But even that isn't an entirely happy solution. For mid-tier and average consumers, this psychological effect is strong. Rolex used to symbolize both luxury and investment quality. Now, for some buyers, it symbolizes high cost with uncertain future value. This shift pushes them to rethink not just which watch to buy, but if they should buy a Rolex at all. Price hikes also affect aspirational customers. When prices rise too fast, aspirations can fade. Buyers may look at companies that offer more accessible entry points into luxury, brands that are slightly cheaper or feel more aligned with their personal budgets. Another aspect of buyer resistance stems from broader consumer sentiment in the luxury market. By 2025, many customers across different markets are reporting a sense that luxury brands are becoming too expensive without enough extra value. Some buyers say they are willing to wait for discounts, seek out second-hand pieces, or avoid high-priced luxury items altogether. This trend is not limited to watches. It affects many luxury sectors, from fashion to accessories. This resistance goes beyond just Rolex. It reflects a shift in how people think about luxury consumption. Buyers today are more likely to compare luxury items with everyday needs and financial goals. If a high-priced Rolex no longer feels justified, they may choose a piece from another brand that offers a different mix of style, function, and price. For example, some buyers might prefer brands with strong resale stability, smaller price increases, or watches that feel more wearable every day rather than purely luxurious. Moreover, Rolex's pricing strategy may inadvertently push customers toward untapped market segments, like vintage market shopping or certified pre-owned programs run by authorized dealers. While this might help second-hand channels, it also means fewer customers are paying full retail prices for new Rolexes. This can affect the brand's overall sales performance and make it appear less desirable compared to its peak years. In simple terms, buyers resist when they feel prices are rising faster than value. This isn't just a matter of numbers, it's a shift in buyer psychology. Customers today want to feel confident that a luxury purchase is worth it in both emotional and financial terms. Whether through questioning value, shifting to pre-owned purchases, or seeing other brands as more attractive, many customers are now more careful with their decisions. This shift in buyer behavior is a key reason why Rolex isn't doing as well as it used to. If this breakdown changed how you think about luxury, let us know in the comments. Do you think Rolex needs to adapt or stick with the features that made it high class? Drop your thoughts below, hit that like button, subscribe so you never miss our next deep dive into the hidden dynamics of wealth, status, and the brands desperately trying to capture both. Because in luxury, nothing is permanent.